All right, we're learning that when Donald Trump snuck off Air Force One in a catering truck last month, turns out he wasn't alone. The Washington Post reports that Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, executive assistant and Trump's, quote, human printer, Natalie Harp, and also the director of Oval Office Operations, Walt Nauta, all joined Trump inside that catering truck, headed for a separate plane, while the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, boarded the flight using the plane's external stairs. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent were sent on the decoy flight, along with policy advisor Stephen Miller and communications director Stephen Chung. Oh, and the White House press corps, who thought and reported that Donald Trump was on board with them. But they all very well may have been in some serious danger. U.S. officials told the New York Times this, that there were multiple streams of information on potential threats, including someone in the vicinity of the NATO summit spotted with a shoulder-fire missile. However, there is new reporting from the Washington Post that the CIA was skeptical of the threat before putting Donald Trump on that secret flight. One U.S. official said, quote, the reports of threats against Donald Trump's life Israeli derived, not U.S. generated, and they were viewed as low confidence. Last night, reporters pressed Donald Trump on his deceptive maneuver.
They wanted me to go on a different flight, a different plane, equal safety, but they wanted me to do it, so I do it. I do what they say.
Why did they want you to do that?
I guess there was a threat out there. I didn't really ask too much about it. I get a lot of threats.
Why was it too dangerous for you to fly on Air Force One, but
well,
not
I don't know. I think
the
actually the plane that I flew on was at greater risk. I think it was at greater risk because that would be the plane I think that they would be more likely to go for.
You gotta be kidding me. With all of this new information coming out about this incident, journalist Garrett Graff details this. The Russian nesting dolls of scandal within the Air Force One scandal. The scandals within scandals within scandals, including corner cutting on presidential security, an attack on freedom of the press, and the ongoing risk of Trump's war with Iran. Quote, this isn't a laughable operation to sneak away from the press in a catering truck. This was high-stakes presidential gamble with global stability and nuclear war hanging in the balance that indicates anew how much Trump's ego and corruption undermines our security at home and abroad. Garrett Graff is the author of the Doomsday Scenario newsletter, and he joins me now. Garrett, you called this, and I love this, a Russian nesting doll of scandals. So let's start with the outer shell of the scandals within scandals and scandals, the Qatari jet. Go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to remember why we ended up in a situation where Donald Trump was trying to scramble to get air transport out of the NATO summit in Turkey. And that begins with his acceptance of this wholly inappropriate $500 million Qatari 747 that he wants from the royal family, that he accepted last year, that may or may not be coming with him to his presidential foundation and museum, that he had the Air Force retrofit and repaint to become his new Air Force One, his new presidential plane that was debuted months earlier than it could possibly be securely fitted to fly to this NATO summit at the beginning of July. And what we now understand is that that plane lacked some of the basic defensive capabilities that are normally part of the presidential fleet, which is how you end up with the president trying to leave Turkey aboard what was then the backup jet, this long-standing blue and white 747, traditionally known as Air Force One.
Right after he got back from Turkey, he wrote on social media about a standing, what's called dead man switch order that he left to decimate Iran, his words, potentially a reference to nuclear missiles. How seriously should we take that? How dangerous could that make the president's international travel for not just the people on board that old Air Force One, but everybody?
Yeah, and this is sort of one of the parts of this story that I think we're better understanding only in hindsight. I mean, there is so much in Trump's presidency that is sort of weird in real time that why it's weird and what its significance ends up being really only comes apparent as future details are known. This is a situation where we now understand that there was, what the military and the Secret Service took very seriously as a threat leaving Turkey. And the president comes home after this decoy flight, which, again, we didn't know about at the time, and makes this very weird weekend oblique reference to the idea that there are thousands of American nuclear missiles on standby in the event that something happens to him. And now we can understand that that was a threat and potentially a conversation that Donald Trump had as part of this Iranian threat upon his departure from Turkey.
The next layer down is an obvious one about attacks on freedom of the press. And that really ramped up, like what you're talking about with the nuclear threat after the flight. What does it mean for the government to go after journalists, go after former officials over legitimate news stories? I mean, I sat with Maggie Haberman in the days after this happened, and those subpoenas came. Subpoenas have come before, but not with the speed that they came in the wake of this story coming out.
Exactly, and again, this is something that we have a much better understanding of now. That Trump comes back. There's a lot of weirdness about why he was on this backup 747, or at least that we thought that he was on this backup 747 at the time. Comes back. The New York Times breaks the news that there was this potential threat and that the new Qatari jet lacked defensive capabilities. That throws the White House into a spiral. You see this very strange and I think it's fair to say unprecedented, urgent leak investigation unfold, where FBI Director Kash Patel is pulled off of a weekend junket to Chicago.
Brought to the White House, right?
War room. It brought to the White House, set up a war room with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and that they end up subpoenaing the New York Times journalists who made this original reporting, and then ends up sort of falling apart in this very shambolic and embarrassing series of court proceedings where the government is forced to admit that it had actually not pursued any other investigative avenues prior to subpoenaing a journalist, as U.S. policy is supposed to have them do.
It's also extraordinary, and it's also very serious and consequential. And Garrett Graff, you have broken it down like nobody else that I have seen. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's a very weird story, and it's a lot more troubling than I think a lot of people are understanding.
There's no doubt about that. Thank you again.